3, which is oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes. During this section, state law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member, that means if you say something interesting, we can't respond to you. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on non-agenda items? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or approach the lectern if you are here in person. We will take in-person speakers first. Staff will display the timer on the screen, and I believe we're doing 2 minutes. So are there any in-person speakers on general public comment? Okay, seeing none, are there any virtual speakers? No hand, please. Okay, in that case, we will move on to item number 4, which is approval of meeting minutes. So the minutes for the December 2nd, 2025 meetings are presented for approval tonight. Would any member of the public joining us either virtually or in person like to provide a comment on the minutes? Anybody in person? Anybody? No hands first. Okay, then I'll bring the item back for committee deliberation and action. Are there any corrections or comments on the minutes among committee members? If not, can I see a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. We'll now move on to new business. 5.1 of our new business is to amend and add new sections to Article 10, which is the transportation demand management. So Article 10, Chapter 19. 19 is the motor vehicles and traffic section of the Mountain View Municipal Code to establish a citywide TDM program. TDM standing for Transportation Demand Management. So let's see. Okay, the next part of my script is a little repetitive, but I'll see if there's anything that I need to read here. Item 5.1 is titled Amend and Add New Sections to Article 10, Transportation Demand Management, Chapter 19. This appears to be what I already just told you. The staff presentation will be provided by Beth Pacho, Transportation Planner, and Allison Boyer, Assistant Public Works.
Good evening. My name is Allison Boyer. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director for Transportation and Business Services, and I have with me tonight Ben Pacho, who is our Senior Transportation Planner, and we also have our consultants, Natalie McCarville, and Principal Consultant, and Jeff England, who is Vice President of Program Operations from STEER, joining us to help answer questions. And we're here tonight to discuss the draft citywide transportation demand management ordinance. No. Okay. So City Council identified the development of a transportation demand management ordinance as a strategic priority for fiscal years 2023 and 2025. It was identified as a priority as a result of the city's 2030 general plan, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Program, Sustainability Action Plan, or SAP4, precise plans, as well as regional and state laws. To date, the city's approach to TDM spans a mix of project size and land use types. There are over 27 entitled development projects in Mountain View that have TDM requirements as part of their conditions of approval. These current TDM requirements include different targets and measures. The proposed ordinance aligns with the existing policies and and strategizes TDM standards and monitoring requirements. It ensures consistency with the MTA handbook, the VMT screenings, and the city's greenhouse gas reduction program, while also standardizing trip reduction targets, the TDM planning process, and monitoring and enforcement provisions. Next slide. So reviewing the project workflow, staff is currently in the project phase focused on developing the ordinance language seen here in blue. Over the course of the project, staff has engaged key stakeholders and advisory bodies to gain a broad understanding of current practice with TDM, as well as how requirements can be further streamlined and made more effective under the ordinance. Key insights were gathered from the Downtown Business Association and the TMA. One-on-one interviews were held with developers, employers, property managers, and community members. Collectively, the input gathered has been used to guide the direction of the project, including its vision and goals in the TDM framework. Staff presented the project vision and goals to BPAC, EPC, and CTC in Q4 of 2023, where members voiced their support for the project's objectives. In Q1 of 2025, staff returned to BPAC and EPC to present the TDM policy framework that includes trip reduction standards, reporting elements, and enforcement provisions. CTC and City Council reviewed and supported the proposed framework in Q2 and Q3 of 2025. Staff will present the TDM ordinance to Council for the first and second reading in May of 2026. Next slide. The vision statement, which went to CTC on January 30th, 2024, states that the TDM ordinance will seek to reduce single occupancy vehicle trips for new development and increase use of multimodal transportation alternatives that are sustainable, equitable, effective, and respond to the changing demands. The goal of the project is we're informed by existing conditions analysis and data. And then the staff recommendation, which is a little different than what you read, is the staff is recommending that City Council adopt an ordinance of the City Council repealing and reenacting Chapter 19, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, of Article 10, Transportation Demand Management of the City Code to establish a citywide TDM program and finding the amendments to be exempt from the CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines, Section 15308. Oh, sorry. Next slide. And one more. So a quick overview of the TDM. At a high level, the TDM framework seeks to streamline and implement TDM requirements across the project's lifespan, from the entitlement phase to the post-occupancy phase. The new TDM ordinance will apply to all new development, modifications, change of use, and expansions of existing sites generating 200 or more net new average daily trips, or ADT. This will apply across all land uses, residential, commercial, and mixed use. There are, however, a couple exemptions. Those are for 100% affordable units, very small projects, which are classified as single-family developments of 12 units or fewer, multifamily residential developments of 20 units or fewer, or any office development that is 10,000 square feet or less, as well as patron-driven projects, which with uses less than 100,000 square feet. Projects will have to demonstrate a plan to reduce projected ADT by 20 to 50% through the use of approved TDM strategies and maintain program management and annual reporting post-occupancy. The city will maintain records of annual project reports, and any non-compliance may result in corrective action and or fines assessed by the city. Next slide. Trip reduction targets will be determined by size of the project, and they're divided into three categories. Small projects are 200 to 499 ADT. Medium projects are 500 to 999 ADT, and large projects, which are 1,000 ADT. Projects will be required to implement TDM strategies that reduce ADT to the following levels of 30, 40, and 50% respectively. TOD, or transit-oriented design projects, and residential projects will have reduction target levels of 20, 30, and 40% respectively. These thresholds were informed by the city's existing precise plan targets, as well as case studies of similar TDM programs in San Francisco, San Mateo County, Redwood City, and the city of San Jose. Next slide. Prior to the entitlement, prospective applicants will be required to submit a TDM plan for city review. Specifics of the TDM plan will then be included in the conditions of approval preceding adoption by council. TDM plans will be comprised of two types of strategies. Core strategies offer an array of flexible, proven trip reduction strategies that applicants may select from to develop a project's TDM plan. Some examples of core strategies include transportation subsidies and van pool incentives. The auxiliary measures, which when paired with core strategies, are complementary and more effective at reducing trips. Some examples of auxiliary strategies are wayfinding improvements and transportation-related marketing events. Applicants will have access to the TDM toolkit, which is designed to offer a menu of strategies that vary in scale and cost, allowing projects to create site-specific TDM plans fit for their purposes. Next slide. Moving into the monitoring elements of the framework, this slide illustrates the various reporting activities that projects will be responsible for, which are again organized based on project size. Small projects must report out annually for 3 years, medium projects for 10, and large projects for 20. Additionally, residential and patron-driven uses are exempt from additional project performance monitoring conducted through annual travel surveys and traffic counts. And with that, I will pass it on to Ben.
Thanks, Allison. So staff would like to note a few key updates which have been incorporated into the TDM policy framework based on feedback we've received since last June's study session with council. The proposed changes include exemptions such as for patron-driven uses, implementation of housing action items, exemptions from site-specific trip caps for residential and patron-driven uses, updates to enforcement provisions, and optional TMA membership.
Thanks.
For the first update, proposed patron-driven uses less than net 100,000 square feet will be exempted from the TDM program. Categorized as non-residential, these project types typically generate trips that are primarily by patrons to customers rather than by employees. Examples of such projects would include childcare centers, restaurants, entertainment, medical, retail, including general merchandise and groceries, as well as other personal services. This exemption was incorporated into the framework, recognizing the value of such uses that are neighborhood serving and also support economic vitality by attracting and retaining high quality retail and other service oriented uses. The next update relates to the city's housing element program, which went into effect in 2023. Provisions of the housing element require the city to adopt a TDM ordinance to help identify lower cost options for developers to meet TDM requirements. And to support this effort, the ordinance will allow residential parking reductions and exemptions for projects that enhance features of a TDM plan, which would achieve a higher level of trip reduction over and beyond the minimum requirement. To satisfy the enhanced TDM criteria, a residential project must either 1, exceed its ADT reduction target by at least 5%, or 2, adopt 1 additional core strategy and 2 additional auxiliary strategies over the minimum required number from the toolkit. The enhanced TDM criteria presented are really intended to incentivize higher levels of trip reduction and reduce parking demand while increasing mobility options for residential projects. And the next update to the framework includes exemptions from monitoring and reporting requirements for residential and patron-driven uses. Specifically, all residential and patron-driven uses will be exempted from meeting site-specific trip caps and associated ADT reduction targets. The exemptions also extend to the requirements to provide travel surveys and conduct traffic counts. The noted exemptions here reflect existing conditions and local and state regulations, which seek to collectively reduce financial costs and administrative burdens related to delivering more affordable housing and neighborhood serving uses. However, still required of these projects will be the requirements to adopt and implement a TDM plan and provide ongoing annual TDM reporting in accordance with budget size. And then moving ahead, the proposed ordinance seeks to align the enforcement provisions under city code enforcement violations and administrative penalties of the muni. This approach aligns with neighboring jurisdictions, which also codify violations of noncompliance as the basis for administrative citations under the muni code. So some examples of noncompliance might include failure of a project to submit annual TDM monitoring reports or maintain an ongoing TDM plan. Additionally, updated enforcement provisions will consistently apply to all projects subject to the ordinance rather than by specific project conditions of approval. For the next framework update, the proposed ordinance will not require projects of any size to join the TMA. Membership in the TMA will be optional and included in the TDM toolkit to incentivize new projects to join as a way to satisfy the TDM requirements and interpretation goals. So while TMA membership will not be required, staff will work with the TMA to explore the process of establishing a property-based assessment district or PBAD following adoption of the ordinance. Similar to other jurisdictions, such as City of Emeryville, the goal of establishing the PBAD will be to provide a long-term and scalable approach to funding TMA-provided services, including the Envigo shuttle. Most notably, a PBAD would support growing membership in the TMA over time by clearly defining its governance structure and assessment of membership fees. Currently, staff is working with the project team to develop a cost estimation and implementation planning study as part of this work. The study will evaluate the range of city staff time and administrative resources required to administer the ordinance, including TDM plan review and ongoing monitoring and reporting activities. The findings of this report will inform the basis of an annual TDM fee, which will be intended to recover a portion of the city's ongoing costs associated with implementing the ordinance. Following completion of this fee study, staff will draft a resolution for the City Council to review. Once the TDM ordinance is in effect, its provisions, including chip reduction standards and monitoring requirements, will be codified in the City Code. Additionally, the TDM program standards will be a key guiding document to implement the citywide TDM program. The TDM program standards document will be an appendix to the MTA handbook, which may be updated periodically to reflect changes in travel patterns, technological innovation, and TDM best practices. And then for next steps, I'll pass it back to Allison.
So following the CTC review tonight, we will be taking this ordinance to council for comment or for the first read on May 12th and the second reading on May 26th. Staff is anticipating final adoption of the ordinance in May of 2026, with it going into effect in June 26th. Once adopted, implementation steps will include development and refinement of the TDM program standards and the TDM toolkit, updating the precise plans and city code to implement housing element action items and ordinance provisions, presenting the annual TDM fee resolution to council for review and adoption, exploring the feasibility of establishing a property-based assessment district or PBAD citywide, integration with the city's permitting and entitlement processes, and it's the establishment of ongoing monitoring and reporting systems, including identifying technology solutions and providers, and coordination with stakeholders and regional partners. And then next slide. And then again, we're here. Staff is recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance of the City Council repealing and reenacting Chapter 19, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, of Article 10, Transportation Demand Management, of the City Code to establish a citywide TDM program and binding the amendments to be exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15308. That is our staff presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. That is always an exciting project for me to see how our transportation demand management program evolves. So I will now we will now take questions from committee members. Do any committee members have questions? Yes, Member McAllister.
Thank you for the report. Feel comfortable with it. So, on slide 12, where it says parking reduction and parking reductions, are we interpreting strictly by what the housing element says what they can do, or are we making it broader so that other things related to the parking?
So the housing element includes, I believe, 3 action items. One is to identify lower cost options for developers to meet their TDM requirements, and then also identify criteria for projects that would qualify for these parking reductions and exemptions from parking minimums. So the ordinance here really kind of operationalizes that and defines what criteria would be for these projects to.
It's not. Everything else, this is the only one I have sort of a concern on, because it's a broader picture of, if we're building these units and there's restriction there and they don't have parking's gonna flow into the neighborhoods. And so the quality of life and the congestion, safety of people, all the cars around is a concern to me. So is there any way we can do both, protect the neighborhood, the traffic and the cars and so forth, and still meet this requirement?
Right. So the residential ADT targets are set so that sufficient TDM strategies would be needed to be put in place to offset any parking, offset any demand for additional parking that would be needed. So the idea is to qualify for these parking reductions and exemptions. They would either have to, again, one, meet a higher level of trip reduction over and beyond what's required at the minimum, or adopt additional strategies. So the idea is that reduced parking or no parking isn't a TDM program in and of itself. You would need.
It's not an item in itself. Okay.
It's not a TDM program. It's sufficient. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And so enough TDM measures would need to be adopted to offset any additional demand from parking.
So they can get the reduced parking, but they have to offset it with, okay.
Additional strategies
Good, okay.
or a percentage of reduction.
Has anybody reached out to our partners like BTA that if we start ramping this up, they will look and see what they can ramp up for? BTA's having struggles right now. And so, but is that something that we're going to keep them as part of the loop so that when we do something or see a project that they might say, we can ask them beforehand. So when the planning process, we can say, hey, we're anticipating this. Can you look at a route?
The ordinance doesn't preclude any coordination with BTA. And so BTA is actually working on a equitable VMT mitigation program at a regional level. And that framework is being, I think, developed in coordination with, what is it, AB 130 also sets a statewide program for VMT reduction. So all of these are strategies that are kind of being developed in the offing. And then once they get more concrete and consistent communication, would certainly kind of engage them on when it would be needed. To start then opening up the option for these developers to opt into that strategy.
Yeah, thank you.
Member Kame, do you have questions? Okay, I have several. One is how what the opportunity will be to add additional tools to the toolkit over time, how that will work.
Right. So since EBC, we've
Or subtract if
right.
they're not working out.
certainly, it's very open-ended. I mean, since EBC, we've added an additional 5 or 6 strategies. So it's a moving target. Which is to say, I mean, these could be updated on a cadence, which makes sense. It could be on a yearly basis. But certainly once we begin monitoring, we'll understand the performance of these strategies, which makes sense. What are easier for projects to adopt.
Yeah, so the toolkit is envisioned to be evergreen, so we can update it as either new strategies become common in the area, or new technologies come about, or new state AB regulations come down the pipeline. But the idea is, as we also collect data from the reports coming in, we can also identify what is working, and we can also adjust those percentages with their ADT reductions. Or if we see developers really like one and they keep bringing it up and it's not in our toolkit, we can add it so that it's identified there. So it is intended to be an evergreen. What the cadence is of updating it, we haven't quite figured out, but I think we'll see where it takes us in our first year.
Okay, great. That's the answer I wanted, and I won't make any more. Well, I'll just say the toolkit is a little computer based at this point, so that's good. Here it's that you're open to. Good to hear that it's evergreen. And then I also have questions about the parking that Member McAllister brought up. When you've looked at how I have basically the same fear that Member McAllister has, that as you reduce parking, people park on the street, because I've done it. And then there's less room for trees, widening sidewalks, street trees, all the other things we might do to encourage, in bike lanes to encourage other travel. So when you've looked at how this works, you mentioned a bunch of other cities, but many of them seemed like San Francisco, San Jose. They seemed, if I lived in an apartment in San Francisco without parking, I would not be parking on the street. So have you really looked a lot at comparable cities? And by comparable, there are dense places, and you named Redwood City, I think. There are dense places in Redwood City and Mountain View, but actual comparable places where there's a lot of street parking available.
Yeah, so I don't know if Laura, you can pull up our very last slide, and it's in your packet, but we did put together a peer city examples that we looked at. We have on that list Sunnyvale, East Palo Alto, Redwood City, San Mateo County, and San Jose, and what their trip reduction targets were and how they're implementing their TDM, and that shows you kind of where we fall. Example would be for Sunnyvale. For their offices, they are looking at a reduction of 65% of peak hour trips. So for ours, we have 50% reduction. So that gives you but that again, that's for offices. For the residential, they're targeting 30%. And for our residential, we go between 20 to 40. So depending on the size. East Palo Alto has a 40% reduction, both residential and non-residential. So we did try and meet what other cities in our area are doing.
And how do you count trip reduction? Because honestly, when I lived at Park Place down the street, 100% of the time, they gave me a parking place, and 100% of the time I parked on the street, not knowing that. Would that be counted? In this metric, you would be counting that as a trip reduction, because I didn't if it was unbundled parking, I would kind of use it.
The points of egress and ingress for development we determined in the phase where traffic monitoring would be, but since for residential projects we're not requiring measuring actual trip reduction targets, what we're doing is we're requiring adoption of TDM at a sufficient level, which would then offset demand for parking or the need for parking. So in our analysis of looking at other peer cities and how they manage parking, this is very much an evolving space. San Jose would probably be the first jurisdiction that handled both TDM and parking together, where they've eliminated parking minimum citywide and adopted in the same action of adopting a TDM ordinance. So San Francisco took it differently. If a project were to provide more parking than above what's normally provided or required in their code. They similarly require additional TDM measures to be adopted. So it's in this similar vein that we require a sufficient level of TDM in alignment with parking reductions and elimination of parking consumption.
To touch on the counting for residential, our enforcement is based specifically on if you in your approved TDM, you say you're going to do something, you have to do it. It's not based on the actual trip reduction targets being met.
So that's pretty much what I was saying. You could, in a place with a lot of neighborhood parking, you could get your TDM credit by cutting down on on-site parking, and people could just be parking in the neighborhood. It's not reducing the trips, but it's qualifying for that particular, is that
Only
correct?
if you're using the housing element additional bonus. So you're going for an additional, you've chosen either 5% more of reducing in your TDM, the plan to reduce it by an additional 5% than what's required.
Right.
Or you're choosing one additional core and two auxiliary strategies. So in order to qualify to reduce the parking, you have to enact additional TDM measures above and beyond the base requirement for that size.
Is it okay if I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the idea behind residential is that, for example, on a large apartment complex, apartment owner would provide a bunch of TDM strategies that are available for the residents living in the apartment building, but they don't have the ability to force the residents to do certain things. Versus if you're a large scale office employer, right, we would check on the enforcement because that office employer has more direct control over the trips that are going in and out of their business.
But to qualify for that parking reduction or if you're doing a large residential, you need 40% trip reduction. In order to get that housing element incentive, you would have to go for 45% trip reduction or 40% with two additions. Sorry, Diana, you want to?
Yeah, if I could just add a few more things. Diana Pancholi, Principal Planner with the Planning Division. Thank you for the question. I think the way I look at it is that, this is one policy strategy that the city is bringing forward. There are other efforts that we are looking at, which will then will act together to see how parking unfolds on site. A lot of other jurisdictions that we have looked at use the residential permit parking program as a key strategy to kind of, manage the parking making sure parking spillovers don't happen in the neighborhoods, which is a obvious concern we hear with a lot of developments in the city. The other part is that, we will have to look at how our parking related strategy in the TDM program is working out. All the recent residential developments that I have seen coming to council in the last 2 years, developers have said to us that parking is a key asset for our residents, and that is very key to the marketability of the project as well. Very few of them will come in with extremely reduced parking numbers. So we're hoping, it is going to be something that we'll be able to save, but right now the developers have been telling us parking is really key for them to provide on site as an asset.
Okay, I'll say the rest of it. It sounds like something that is ongoing. This is why it needs to be evergreen ongoing monitoring. And then we all got email from various interested parties. One of them was whether parking reductions, this from YIMBY, so you've probably seen the question, whether parking reductions could scale with the scale of the
Yeah, we are identifying next steps once the ordinance is adopted, how we would implement parking reductions. And we got a good comment from EBC, which recommended scaling parking reductions based on a certain level. So whether it's, 1 to 10% or 1 to 50%, the amount of credit that we give, we determine how much parking they reduce from. So that's something we need to further flesh out, but it's being considered.
It would be something we can add to the toolkit as we collect more data.
Okay, and then why, you had something on active, you'll know the phrase better than I will, active transportation gaps. Do those include, is there, and as a possible thing that a developer could provide, bridging those gaps? Are other similar things that would encourage walking, like wider sidewalks and more tree canopy, are those considered gaps, or how do you figure those? Because they certainly encourage walking. Are they a part of the toolkit?
We would need to study how that would be operationalized in the toolkit, whether a certain number of trees, right, would qualify for, I mean, it's about essentially trip reduction. So to the extent that, planting additional trees might achieve that, we need to study. But I think where it could potentially qualify is pedestrian-oriented uses and amenities, that are oriented to, active transportation. So to the extent that, multimodal improvements like bike facilities and protection and green elements are considered to that extent, might be, at least the nexus might be there to establish that, but we would need to further understand how that would be in the toolkit.
But if a developer were to come in and ask to do that as a measure, we would have that conversation and ask them to provide why they think that would be a trip reduction and have those conversations. So they can come in with their own strategies.
And it sounds like there might be an intersection with the active transportation plan, things that have been identified there. Or not.
Potentially,
Anyway,
yes.
the future also. Okay, and did I miss it? Is micromobility, it's in there as part of the toolkit? It must be.
Right. So there's bike share membership, and then there's also subsidies that could be provided by a developer, applicant, to tenants, residents, and employees for bike share services. So if they wanted to provide them credits, eventually, once we do have micromobility up and running, the idea is they would be able to use those credits towards, a number of rides or, discount passes, things like that.
So for micromobility, it could be scooters too.
Right.
Correct.
Bike share, scooter share.
Okay, we don't have.
Or-
Okay, those are my questions.
I'm so sorry, I'm catching.
Sure.
Can we address the letter that we got from TMA? Okay, so, it's difficult when people said they work 4:45, and we have a meeting at 6. But
Just sure we have not seen this.
okay, yeah, so that's why I'm bringing it up.
Okay.
Because I was going back, I know there was a couple other questions that people had messaged. So the subject is TDM ordinance, TMA participation and implementation considerations. So, I think I'm trying to find where there's an actual question versus just feedback. If not required through the ordinance, how will consistency with these plans, I mean, the precise plans that were mentioned, North Bay Shore, East Westman, and San Antonio be achieved? That's one of their questions. So I think some of the comments prior to that question was, they use the words, consider the legal constraints associated with mandating participation in a private organization at the same time with the lack of participation requirements. So maybe if staff can share what the conversations were with the TMA leading up to coming to CTC. And apologies, I just thought this.
Yeah, and believe Nitesh on the line, so
Okay.
he can jump in.
Yes, thank you, Allison, and thank you for the question, Councilmember Kamei. I can shed some light on the constraints that the city has. So historically, the TMA has been funded through individual development agreements with developers who agree to contribute according to the size of their project into the TMA to run the Mountain View Shuttle, for instance. However, turning that into a permanent ordinance for funding would require compliance with Prop 218 and Prop 26. And among the restrictions in both of those propositions is that we would have to make findings for the amount of the levy to match the amount of the benefit received by parcel. In addition, we have constraints on providing funding to private organizations that we have to comply with through state law. So keeping the exact same funding structure in place through a TDM ordinance would constitute an unlawful franchise agreement with the TMA. So to avoid that legal issue, it's currently voluntary in the TDM ordinance itself. However, I am working on a process to make it easier for organizations such as the TMA to create a property-based improvement district that could then fund the shuttle.
Thank you. And I guess that goes back to the question I asked right before that is kind of what's the engagement been with the TMA? Do they know that?
They do.
Okay,
They are
thank you.
aware. I
Okay.
think that there is some
Different points of view?
yes.
Okay. And then, so the question.
I will just add though that this ordinance will not be retroactive. So anybody that has already had an active TDM will stay in their active TDM.
So one of the questions was about consistency with some of the precise plan requirements, so that kind of addresses it. Right, okay. Okay, so I think their concern, it sounds like, is just participation. Okay. But I think there was maybe at least in the council briefing that I had with staff, like an opportunity if people want to opt in, maybe if council goes in that direction. And that might be a way to help address some of the concerns of the TMA.
Again, it is a strategy. So they can choose, and there's a lot of benefits from the TMA, like the last mile shuttle. They can help with the reporting. There's a lot they can help developers in enacting their TDM. So we think that it still is a good option, especially for some of those developers that are just trying to figure out where to start.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So now we move on to members of the public. Would any member of the public joining us virtually or in person like to provide comments on this item? So click the raise hand button in Zoom or click that card. And we'll take in-person speakers first, and each person will have 2 minutes. Is there anyone, members of the public? In person, okay. Are there any members of the public virtually who wish to speak?
Yes, David Watson.
Hello, I'm David Watson. You may have seen that we sent a letter. James sent a letter. I wanted to start by thanking Chair Hicks for raising the parking reduction scaling question. I'm glad to hear that that can be addressed administratively. 2 more things from our letter I wanted to mention. The limit parking supply credit shouldn't be contingent on adjacent street parking being metered or permitted. A developer does not control on-street parking policy. That's the city's job, and I'm sure you'll hear me back here asking for on-street metered or permitted parking because that's something that I think the city should absolutely be doing. Another is please open an enhanced TDM parking exemption pathway for projects under the 200 ADT threshold. They are correctly exempt from the ordinance, but that means that they don't have the parking exemption available to them at all. They should be able to opt in. Also, the toolkit still has 7 core strategies marked as placeholders. It's without them, the residential math for the enhanced TDM tier doesn't quite work. It would be nice if that could be available before the council hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there more speakers?
Ronnie Hattrop.
Yeah, hello, good evening, Transportation Committee members. Ronnie Hattrop with the Mountain View Transportation Management Association. I apologize for the late receipt of the letter that we sent today. We had literally just convened our meeting of the Membership and Governance Committee yesterday evening. So we did our best to turn this letter around as fast as possible. And I think really what the purpose of the letter is to really address the concerns that we have in terms of not requiring participation in the TMA. So our TMA works because it's coordinated broadly and supported broadly without including new and medium, large commercial and large residential projects or developments. Efforts risks become disjointed, responsibilities inconsistently applied, and overall outcomes diminished. And there are immediate consequences that we are concerned about. If membership growth is constrained going forward, the TMA will likely need to reduce its services, meaning fewer shuttles, reduced coverage, and less reliable service, pushing commuters and residents back into single occupancy vehicles and increasing traffic congestion. And then one of the considerations I think you had noted there is that consideration should be given for how new development will meet the precise plan requirements in North Bayshore and East Wisman and San Antonio, where TMA participation is required and has been promoted through those programs or through those documents. So we just urge the Transportation Committee to establish a clear path, either through the ordinance or other mechanisms, as Mitesh had stated, PBED being a potential option in the future, to ensure robust participation by new development. And the timing of this is crucial. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns is we're just now exploring potential conversations of a PBED. I have not vetted this conversation with our full board, so I did not address that in the letter. But we know these processes do take time, and there's a likelihood that our services might be impacted even just next year if our growth is significantly impacted from a financial perspective. So I appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you. Are there more speakers?
No, that's all.
Okay, so now I'm bringing this item back to committee members for their comments. One, two, would any of you like to start? I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Member Copper. Well, I am very excited that we are here at this point where we have a final recommendation that we'll be able to bring to our colleagues on council. Feel like I know that I was sharing with staff. I know it's been a long 2.5-year journey, but really excited to where we are now, and didn't have a lot of questions because I had my council briefing yesterday where I have a lot of them. I think one of the biggest things when looking at the ordinance is adopting it, but also allowing for that flexibility that we hear all the time from our development community about, kind of the unpredictability of where we are. And I thought it was really helpful. Thank you so much to staff who pulled together the TDM targets and the case study so they could share it with us. I thought it was just really helpful to understand the context with which we're operating in. And I think the city of San Jose adopted theirs 3 years ago or something, 4, yeah, a while ago. So it's nice to know some of the other cities and what they've done in that time for us to think about. I appreciate that we can adopt the ordinance, but we can also
look back at how we're monitoring and enforcing, I thought that Ms. Crenshaw had brought up a lot of points, good points, which is we hear that parking is getting reduced, but we also hear from developers that they need to include it to make it competitive, and that's what people want. So I think to me, it's really about how we're able to do monitoring. And I think that's really the hardest part. With the North Bay Shore, we're very fortunate where we're able to kind of have those 3 gateway points and you can like count it a lot easier. But as we're implementing our housing element, I think, and seeing development all across our city, we're just gonna have to get on how to do that. But I think that doesn't mean we shouldn't adopt the TDM ordinance and the different, core strategies and auxiliary strategies. It just means that it may need to come back to council, and that's okay, that the ordinance allows for that. So I think that's all good. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that staff took into, patron-driven uses, but really what I call like neighborhood serving uses. We've been adopting like our economic vitality strategy. We've been focusing on that as we've been adopting our housing element and talking about activation in the different nodes of our city. So really like that we want to encourage that to continue throughout our city. And so those would be extents. I think that's part of the reality we're living in. And I understand and hear what the TMA is saying. I think that the more incentives that we can provide, the more that people will like voluntarily opt in instead of opt out. And I really like the evolution of where the ordinance have landed, because I do think it feels less punitive and more participatory. So I think that is important. The thing that came up in my briefing that I want to like daylight for my other committee members, I would be really great, is council adopted our master fee schedule update. And I think one of the other ways we can, when the future council looks at revising the master fee schedule, they can include like the implementation of the TDM ordinance, the staff time dedicated to that, to do cost recovery. And I think that would be efficient and effective. So I just want to drop that in right now for my colleague who will be here when that comes back. I think that's everything. But I'm thrilled and happy, and I can move the staff recommendation as we have discussion. Thanks.
So I'm familiar with this from the 2013. So where you've been seeing it for 4 years, I think it's evolved from 2013 when we really had a lot of jobs being created in North Bay Shore. We did have that choke point, and we're trying to reduce the traffic on 85, all the others coming to the areas. And it took some time to get going. So we flash forward to now, and we're trying to get something going here. What I like about the plan is that the enforcement, I know it's a bad word, but it's a good word, because we need to make this plan work. We need to be able to enforce it. And that's one thing that we never were able really to do with our other TMA, but we did get a lot of shuttles going through. One thing that we should be looking for is, when I was looking at this to be successful, and the patrons driving is not going out the driveway, so that's exempt. Where are they're going to get these TMs to take them to? Isn't it pretty much to their job sites that are out, because otherwise everything else is exempt. So if North Bay Shore is reducing jobs or increasing the housing, I'm going to be interesting to see how they can get the traffic reduction if the jobs are, let's say they're moving to San Jose. So I drive to San Jose. How is that going to affect mountain use trip reduction? So, and a lot of this is contingent, from my perspective, from doing this for a while, is the shuttle services and the bus services have to be a main component for getting people out of cars. And we're not there. And if the current situation is, we're not going to be there a long time. no offense to BTA, but they're having some issues and a lot of that stuff is coming along. So just again, what I emphasize is we have to work with TMA on their shuttles in town. We got to work with BTA in their shuttles. We got Caltrain, BTA Light Rail. And that's Light Rail is a whole different story. It's part of the solution. Those are my comments, and I will support the motion.
Okay, well, luckily for me as chair going last, you said almost everything I've written in my notes. Yeah, I'm excited about this too. I think that, it's a fascinating subject. We are also facing, as Chair McAllister started to say, really changing times. Who knows where jobs are going, and also how, automated vehicles might interface with this. Will they do first and last mile stuff, or will they kill our mass transit, or will they do something else entirely? That's so. Principally, one of the big things I like is that this is evergreen, given that there's a time of change. And I also thought, well, I think the history of it is very like traditional commute, relief congestion, and then it seems like the reduce your carbon footprint was added in. Things have been rightfully added in over time. But I think because of its commute origins, it's very commute oriented. And as as Member McAllister said, we are becoming like the growing element in town is housing. So, and it has all sorts of other restrictions on how we can use this. So we're really going to have to monitor this. I don't, through nobody's fault, various tools may or may not work the way we originally intended. So I really want to be open to that this is kind of a pilot. Let's see, I really like that the EPC, I think it was the EPC, put in what they call patron-driven uses. I think that's a way of making this more, as Member Kane said, it's neighborhood, so you can also call them neighborhood serving uses. And I've heard 70% of trips are non-commute. I don't know if that's true. I just heard it in a webinar. But anyway, a lot of them are, and they are for these kinds of uses, whether it's childcare or groceries, drugs, etc. I really want to see more of that, and I also want to see more focus on. I think for this plan, we look at mass transit as we should, and we look at bike lanes and bike uses, but not so much of walking. And walking in cities that I've seen that reduce SOV use, walking is a big part of it. So I think we need to interface with the ATP studies I did when I was a planner at Oakland. I will not give you the whole thing, but I was asked to see how far people were willing to walk from the office to a parking garage, and read tons of studies. And the answer is, it depends. The answer is, it depends on what's between the office and the parking garage. And there are all sorts of elements that I want to, tell you about. But one of them is, do people enjoy the walk? Because they will purposely park far away and get in their daily steps. So I really think we cannot discount that and make our city into, how do I say it, a horrible place to walk and then expect people to walk. People will walk. It doesn't have to be a parking garage for downtown. It can be, how far will they walk? They'll walk farther if they enjoy it than if they hate the walk. So I want to, in the future, I want more on green infrastructure. I want more on, call them patron-driven uses. I agree with what our YIMBY letter said about not wanting metering everywhere, that regulation, the whatever it's called, RPP program is often enough. I agree with Member McAllister that we have to pair this with mass transit and see that as a changing thing, something we can interact with to make it work better for us, maybe. And when we say safe routes to school, I always want the word scooter in there, because I think most grade school children scoot, not just roll, because that's what that means besides us. And think I like membership being voluntary, and I think that is all of my, that's all of my notes.
Forgot a question. Oh, sure. When does the residential park occur back?
I don't know that answer, but we can find out. Okay. Okay, so with that, any last thoughts? Do we have did somebody make a motion? Okay, and you seconded? Okay, all those in favor? Passes unanimous. Thank you so much.
We're still here then. Not that. Was flexing.
You get a staff shake shop. Be careful of the makes some really good shows. I love that.
Placeholders will be updated with the council comes out.
Okay, understand.
There were the comment on the placeholder.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Like in the tool, in the toolkit.
Very accelerated.
Right there, yeah.
But no.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Getting set up. Want another minute?
Yes.
Okay. Or next. When you're ready. Yeah, I'm gonna say while our staff is setting up, we're going to take a 5-minute break and we'll be back at 7:10.
You said pretty much.
7:08. So we are now moving on to, I'm going to start the meeting again, moving on to item 5.2, which is the Middlefield Road Complete Streets Project 22-01. The staff presentation will be provided by Paul Nguyen. I hope I pronounced that pretty well. Probably later. Associate Civil Engineer. So staff presentation.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Hoa Nguyen, Associate Civil Engineer with Civil Infrastructure. Here with me tonight is Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer, and Adam here from CFP Engineering. Adam will be joining us remotely. We're here today to present a design concept for Middlefield Complete Street. Project location is on Middlefield Road between Morfett and Bernardo, as outlined in the red dotted line. Middlefield Overpass, Stephen Creek's Trail, and Caltrans State Route 85 between Morfett and Easy Street. Crossed PTA Light Rail between Ellis and Lock Avenue. And undercost Caltrans State Route 237 near Bernardo. Whole improvements were submitted as part of the OPEC grant application, as shown on the left, including roadway resurfacing from Morfett to Wismont, Class 4 protected byways between Morfett and Bernardo, Class 2 by-lanes of the facility of State Route 85 overpass, pedestrian and bicycle improvement at 4 intersections, Morfett, Boulevard, Easy Creek, Tarela, and Goodman's Road. Because the city received new grants from Middlefield, which will be discussed in next slide, new scope was added to the project as shown on the right. So, roadways resurfacing entire corridor, new pedestrian hybrid signal at Tarela, pedestrian and bicycle improvements for all intersections along the corridor. So this slide shows the timeline this project has taken so far. In June 2022, BPAC was presented the complete street checklist for the OPEC 3 grant application. In January 2023, the city was awarded $2.4 million to the OPEC 3 grant. Staff went to the council in February 2023 to secure the grant. In May 2024, City Council authorized professional services agreement with CFP for design services and construction support. Design will kick off in fall 2024. City received 2 additional grants for Middlefield. The first one is the Housing Incentive Grant, received in June 2025 in the amount of $1.76 million. And then in December 2025, City was awarded $5.17 million to the Affordable Housing Sustainability Initiative Program. The OPEC 3 grant is a federal grant that comes with certain requirements, including coordination with California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, which is also the OPEC administrative authority. City commits to deliver the project scope indicated in the grant application within the grant funding timeline. Funding must be obligated by January 2027. Additional funds received from the Housing Incentive Pool and the Affordable Housing Sustainability Communities grants will help the city fund additional scope. It is important to the city to invest in Middlefield because it is one of the city's regional corridor. We want to highlight that Middlefield is one of the only east-west regional corridor in the city network to directly connect the adjacent cities of Sunnyvale and Palo Alto. Vision Zero Action Plan and Local Safety Plan identify Middlefield as part of the local high injury network. The Access MV Comprehensive Model Plan identify Middlefield as a high stress facility with bicycle level of traffic stress 3 out of 4 and a tier 2 priority corridor for transportation improvement project proposing class 4 separated byways. Proposed improvements on Middlefield are part of the draft active transportation plan. So the map show major corridor in the city in orange. Corridors that have recently received or are planned to receive road diets are highlighted in green. That also investigated implementing a road diet on Middlefield. Factors UN staff consider a road diet include roadway classification, overall roadway network, average daily trips, safety, emergency response, transit access, and operational impacts. In March 2025, DBPAC provided comments on the Moffett District project, requesting consideration of a road diet. Therefore, staff evaluated the Middlefield corridor for a potential road diet from 2-lane to 1-lane direction and would like to share a summary of the results. The scenarios analyzed were existing conditions, background conditions, and cumulative conditions. The criteria used to evaluate the scenarios are roadway capacity, level of service, and queuing analysis. Hourly traffic volumes were evaluated against roadway hourly capacity to identify roadway capacity efficiencies. With road diet, Middlefield would experience overcapacity condition as indicated in the table. The left column shows corridor divided into 3 segments. The first segment is between Moffett and Richmond. So with implementing the road diet, this segment would experience overcapacity for 1 hour during evening peak hours under existing and background condition, 2 hours during morning peak hours, and 3 hours during evening peak hours under cumulative conditions. The third row shows roadway capacity on the segment between Richmond and 237, and the last row shows the roadway capacity on the remaining segment between 237 and eastern city limits. Level of service is a ladder-based graded system measuring the operating condition of an intersection, with A representing best free flow conditions and F representing what jet condition. As shown on the map, with road diet implemented, 5 intersection circle will experience a degrade level of service to E or F. Level of service analysis is still a common practice for operational analysis of local intersection. Vehicle miles traveled has been brought up. However, it is used more in a psychotraffic analysis context. Queuing analysis evaluates vehicle stacking on left-hand lane at the intersection. The road diet would cause substantial queuing deficiency at several intersections along the corridor. And to resolve the queuing deficiency, existing left-hand lane would need to be lengthened. So in this slide, as one example, I can show how much the left-hand lane is to be lengthened at the Morphet and Middlefield intersection if implementing the road diet. On the eastbound direction, the left-hand lane would need to be extended 200 feet, which would require median reconstruction and remove approximately 15 trees. On the westbound, the left-hand lane would need to be extended 400 feet, and it is not feasible due to extensive change in roadway geometry. Additional locations along corridor include at Ellis Street, Wisman, Lock Avenue, and State Route 237, northbound Summit. In summary, the study concluded that a road diet would result in deficiency of the intersection's level of service, increase intersection vehicle queuing, and reduce corridor capacity. Additionally, implementing the road diet would cause the loss of capacity, which will impact the operation of all the east-west arterials and the emergency response time for medical, police, and fire services. For the above reasons, staff does not recommend implementing a road diet for Middlefield. Over the next slides, Robert will walk you through segment by segment showing the proposed improvements and cross-section along the corridor.
Thank you, Walt. So the existing corridor conditions can be split into two distinct segments. Segment A from Moffett to Wisman, and segment B from Wisman to Bernard. Segment A, excluding the segment over State Route 85, comprises mostly multifamily homes. 2 travel lanes in each direction, Class 2 bike lanes on both sides, which becomes parking lanes on weekends and after 7 p.m. on weekdays. Feedback we received from the BPAC last week included advancing the parking removal now or as soon as possible, rather than waiting for the design approval. This would require consideration from the council. We'll talk about more of that in the feedback section. To implement a full-time Class 4 bike facility on the on-street parking will need to be removed at all times. In addition to vertical elements, green bike lane striping on the right there will be added to conflict zones such as driveways and bus stops. Within this segment, the State Route 85 overpass is approximately 1,000 feet long, as shown here on the right, and spans across State Route 85. There is a center median, 2 travel lanes, and a Class 2 bike lane in each direction. No sidewalk on the southbound side. Staff evaluated closing the sidewalk path along the south side of the bridge over State Route 85, including the feasibility of converting the existing bike lane to a shared multi-use path for eastbound bicyclists and pedestrians. Staff met with California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, which owns the bridge. Caltrans staff confirmed alterations to the overpass, including but not limited to modifying the median and adjusting lane widths, will require a comprehensive review and approval process, which would cause the project to miss the OBAC 3 funding grant deadlines. Therefore, staff will pursue design of a multi-purpose path as a separate project. This separate project will be proposed for additional design and construction funding in the next fiscal year. For the current project, the proposed layout of the bridge overpass will be similar to the existing condition as shown. The top diagram here is the existing condition, and the one on the bottom is the proposed section. So the next segment, segment B, is the Wisman Road to Bernardo. This segment comprises mostly commercial buildings.
2 travel lanes, and a full-time Class 2 bike lane in each direction. Left turn lanes and center landscaping median islands. This segment crosses the VTA light rail near Logue Avenue and runs underneath State Route 237 with on-ramp and off-ramp entrances. A new crosswalk at the VTA light rail crossing to connect to the existing multi-use path was considered as a project element. This project will require CPUC approval and VTA coordination due to proximity to VTA tracks. Given this context, it will be addressed as a separate project. Similar to segment A, improvements include Class 4 bike facilities with buffers and vertical delineators to provide separation between bike lanes and travel lanes. In addition to vertical elements, green bike lane striping will be added at conflict zones such as driveways and bus stops. Typical intersection improvements include high visibility crosswalks, advanced stop bars, accessible pedestrian signals, ADA compliant curb ramp upgrades. And a note here, I have the directional curb ramps design will be evaluated where feasible. The diagram we show here shows ADA curb ramps that kind of point into the middle of the intersection. The design standard is to provide directional curb ramps where practical and feasible. I'll stop there. Oh, and the green striping. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Staff share the concept design for the field with the impact last week on April 29 and received the following recommendations. First one, remove parking and convert the existing part-time byland to full-time ahead of project design completion. If it's feasible, but it will require formal noticing to residents and council approval. Considering available staffing and backlog in both transportation planning and street maintenance, delivery will be toward the end 2026. The second feedback is implementing road diet on Middlefield. It's not recommended by the road diet study. Also, implementing road diet would require the project redesign, which would cause the city to miss the OPEC funding application deadline of January 2027 and will lose the grant. The third one is to consider including protected intersection design. Middlefield is a VTA route and intersect with truck routes, including Morphe. That will require wider turn ones. Protected intersection is not recommended due to the need to acquire additional right of way and reconstruct the intersections, which will have substantial impact on the project cost and schedule. The next feedback is to close the sidewalk gap on the south side of the State Route 85 overpass. Not feasible to be included as part of this project due to the extensive comprehensive permitting review and approval process. However, it will be evaluated by a future project, which will be a proposal for funding in the next fiscal year. And last, feedback is consider 10 or 10 half-foot wide vehicle lanes. 10 or 10 half-foot wide lane width are not city standards. City follows NECTO recommendation with 11-foot lane based on the type of roadway Middlefield is, a transit corridor. So staff will incorporate feedback and citizen feedback and proceed with the design. CF3 will assist with initiating the design coordination with Caltrans, subject to Caltrans approval. We anticipate the design completion by end of 2026 and with construction in summer 2027. Thank you.
Yeah, right. That's the entire presentation I asked him. So, now it's time for committee member questions.
So I had a question about when we move from class 2 bike lanes to class 4, do we see or do it tend to stay the same? Do we not want?
This is usually situation by situation. So if the corridor stays the same, we're not changing anything. If you're taking lane width away from travel lane, say an existing travel lane, it's 14 feet. It's like very generous. You will see a lot of speeding in those lanes. So if you take that and put 3 or 4 feet into a buffer, you've got a class 4 bike lane, you've got a buffer, and you've got a narrower driving lane. So in those situations, the driver feels like they have a little bit more restriction. So the natural tendency is to slow down.
So I think sometimes when the topic of the roadway, it's like the speed at which people are traveling. But I was just looking over the staff report. It seems like another issue in addition to the funding is just like the volumes, which we're seeing people use their vehicles along Middlefield. Did I read that correctly? It sounds like we have literally almost 2,000 vehicles.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Right. Okay. And if we went to the road diet, it would go down, basically cut it in half. Is that what I just want to make sure I read everything.
Yeah, the capacity of the road would go down split half.
Okay. And right now, I'm so sorry, I didn't think of these questions prior. So how many feet is Middlefield now, like the two lanes?
On the widths of the 2 lanes.
Because if we reduce with the transport, I'm just wondering if that makes transport.
You're gonna do some math for us and figure out if we can squeeze
That's
in.
why I leave it to professional. But that was just one of the things.
Yeah, so segment B showed the existing 2 travel lanes on the top. So the widths vary, but it's about 11 and 11, so that's about 22 feet
Each lane.
on the one direction, and then each lane, and then excuse me, 22 feet total, 11 and 11, and then 12 and 11 in the other direction. So if you do a little bit of math on the bottom, we propose giving some of that to a buffer area, about 3 feet, and then the existing bike lane going from about 8 feet down to about 6 feet. So taking some of the area from the bike lane and putting it into the buffer. But each of the lanes would be reduced down to the city standard, about 11 feet.
Okay. Another question. So I think council had looked at this project originally as like one project, but as a result, it sounds like there may be 3 projects coming out of it, which is this project, which we can use the funding, the segment over 85, and then basically the VTA CPUC part. And we TBD on when those 2 new project segments would be determined. That would come back to council as part of this year.
Or as a mid-year total.
Hi.
Hi, good evening. Ed Arango, Assistant Local Works Director. Thank you for the question. So as far as timing, I can give you approximate timing based on we're expecting to do. So we're hoping to do a mid-year we understand the importance of what's happening, providing another access point on the so we're looking to get this through design, which is we expect to be done at the end of this year. And come to council at that time for a new mid-year capital project to get funded, and then we can proceed with that. And then as far as the the crossing at the light rail tracks, we had discussed, timing, but we can evaluate that as part of that project or separate. We come back to you.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay. Well, I had other questions and now they're like.
You can go back, we'll
Yeah,
trigger your,
okay.
we'll trigger your
Tell me,
questions
re-trigger
again.
No, re-trigger my mind.
Yeah.
Cause I started thinking about.
So I've submitted a few questions and I appreciate everybody's patience. A lot of you have been looking at this since 2022, so I'm coming in with this with fresh eyes and not hearing a lot of the background. So when I asked a lot of questions was to just give me some background information to get a sense of what's going on. And so every time I look at bike lanes, I always ask, what's, and I listened to EPC and I didn't hear one person ask about how many people are asking about BPIT. Why do I keep thinking BPIT? Where he asked about people riding on the lane, and they came back with some information from 2018. Has there been any data collected or counting traffic counts since 2018 for bike riders on this roads?
Not to my knowledge. So the transportation planning is usually responsible for the transportation evaluation parts of this. Projects that are identified as priorities come out of planning studies like Mission Zero and ACTIV, and in the future active transportation plan. Those projects are identified as priorities and then they're voted for delivery. So as part of those studies, they identified this. I think the high priority collision network, high injury network was identified, as well as the performance of the road in terms of strats. So
that sort of got me to my next question. I think you answered it. Ridership is not a criteria. These other items are criteria for what's being developed.
That's right.
And I asked another question that was, these answers are great, and I appreciate your staff, whoever did it. Hopefully they were straightforward questions, somebody could bang them out. So short time you guys did it, I appreciate your whole department getting this to me. So really nice. I had another question. It says scope of the OBAG 3 granted, and I asked one of the questions was the upgrade on bike lanes class 1 requirements, and the response was the upgrade class was included. It didn't really answer the question. So was there an option, or is that part of the criteria of other things that the class 4 bike lanes were?
So we proposed class 4 as part of our application, and the OBAG criteria scores the applications based on the project elements and the benefits to that. So they saw the class 4s and they gave it a score. That's how we were awarded.
Okay. No, you guys answered that. I mean, I have some comments going forward, but well, let me ask you this way. They're easy. There wasn't a response. You sent out 1,700 postcards, and I asked what was the expected turnout. I noticed there was 20 responses and 8 people in person. So 1,700, we got 28 responses. That's.
I couldn't give you an answer.
No, okay.
I can't really give you a good answer now in terms of return. So if I was a surveyor, pollster, I would have that.
Okay, I was just. I'll bring that up in comments. Okay, those are another thing. So I know that's it. You did a good job.
A lot of questions, very good answers. Good questions. Did that trigger your question? No. Okay. Well, I'll ask you.
I'm reading his.
I'll ask a few and see if. So can you tell me a little more, because many members of I'm gonna ask mostly questions that members of the public asked me. So I see you reducing lanes from 11.5 to 12 to 11 feet. And then people have said that also sometimes 10 feet is that we've used it. People claim it's been used on El Camino Real. And I'm not double check to see if they're right. And then I think in the presentation you just gave, you said we're not doing that because a corridor of this type, we don't go down lower than 11. But it also later in it says we'll review that during the design standard review. So can you just give me a little more information on when you go down to 10? I like that you, comment, but I like that you're steadily adding them to the buffer, and maybe someday they go down further, the buffer will become something else. But yeah, can you tell me a little more about what you think about 10 feet in various places and why you choose?
Sure. So let's start with El Camino Real. So it's a major corridor, lots of different types of traffic. And my understanding from the Caltrans design was it was designed for most of the corridor with one 11-foot lane and a 10.5-foot lane. So the 11-foot lane is closest to the curb. That's where all the buses are. 10.5-foot is right next to it. On pinch points, there probably are areas that 10.5 might have had to go lower, but that's how it was designed. So the feedback that we've got from our traffic team is that can be very, very challenging on basically the box truck.
You mean on middle?
Well, in terms of feedback of what we're
experiencing
now, the 10.5-foot lane on El Camino now can be a challenge. When you have a box truck next to the bus, it feels like a very very tight corridor. Most people navigate it. I don't know if there's been an uptick in collisions, but that's been the feedback. So the feedback from that is we want the city standard to be 11. The second half of your question regarding the design standard is that is a CIP project that everyone on council is very enthusiastic about. I heard that last month. So as part of that, we'll be looking at and codifying the widths of the streets based on type of streets. So arterials, corridors, residential areas with a lot of transit will get different lane treatments.
Okay, thank you. I have a much better understanding now. It is that way at pinch points on El Camino. There may be problems you're evaluating and okay. And then so VPAC said, could you do the parking removal ahead of the project? Is the answer yes to that, or maybe?
So the answer is yes. I think we put a couple caveats there because our transportation planning is reduced staff. Our street maintenance backlog, work backlog. So we kind of put that in terms of like, yes, we can do it, but the expectation would be immediate.
Yes, according to your staff department out there.
Hi, again, Ed Arango. I just want to reinforce what Engineer Gonzalez mentioned. It really is staff resources. We have a lot of projects that we're trying to get through the efforts. We're very diligent. We're being very aggressive in our project delivery process. And this effort requires us to notify all the residents, make sure that there's adequate time, and then there's an ordinance that does need to get a conflict for this as well to officially remove the parking. We're supportive of it, as of course it is very in line with the project. It just requires staff resources towards the end of this calendar year.
Okay, thank you. So feasible, but it comes on staff resources. And then I'm going to ask a couple questions that a bunch of members of the public wrote a group letter, and I'm going to ask some questions from there. One question they asked was, can you evaluate a middle field? I got these colors. So I'm just understanding them now. Maybe you've read them. Can you evaluate a middle field road diet as part of the current resurfacing project? It seems,
That's the question, just like,
sure.
how does the city approach looking at everything? That might be helpful. Okay. Is that okay?
I love questions that piggyback.
Well, because it's not just, I think it's just not
Yeah.
just Middlefield, but if like we were to like look at another
Right.
nation, I just
Yeah.
want to understand that process.
Yeah, so there's a couple
Sorry.
things that happen, but during the planning process, during the Access MB or the Active Transportation Plan, or other areas, other planning projects, planning exercises such as that, they will look at the corridor use. They will look at the physical constraints of the corridor, the curb to curb width, and they'll look at current uses, see where the bike pedestrian activity is now, and then they'll recommend corridors for evaluation. So they kind of look at the demand side first, and then from there, the next trigger is really a traffic demand study to really evaluate what kind of how it's used now in terms of capacity. So we've done that now with, I think the example where it's in front of us with Middlefield is a really good one. It has look at the road capacity, the queuing impacts, and the level of service. Thank you for the different intersections. So that's typically what we'll do is we'll bring on a traffic consultant to evaluate those modeling results after we've identified a corridor that's a good candidate for at least looking at a road diagram. So going back to your question, can we do an evaluation of the road diet for Middlefield? Is that the question? So
Yeah,
I
it
think
seems like
that's
we
what-
did, so I'm not sure. The answer is yes.
The answer is yes. The answer is here we are. So if there's other, like, if there's questions specific to the
Yeah,
study, I'm happy to answer.
yeah, I thought that these were, let's see. These seem to be more comments on things, so if they are more questions, then, turn it into questions. Later. Okay, so those are my questions. Are there any other questions that are triggered? Okay, then we will move on now to public comment on this item. If you are here in person to make a comment, please come to the lectern. If you are online, raise your hand.
Right. Hi, I'm Valerie Fennick. I am a member of the Performing Arts Committee. I'm not speaking for that committee. I'm neither speaking for my employer either. Former member of BPAC. Nice to see familiar faces here. I bike, walk, commute, and drive on this corridor. Lots of cyclists. That right now the part-time parking is a real problem because particularly as it gets dark, particularly as it gets dark, people just start parking there in the winter. It makes it very dangerous, particularly in the rain. Incredibly dangerous. It's a regular part of when I am able to commute by bicycle, physically able, that is part of my regular commute. I heard that one segment is at capacity, would be at capacity with a road diet. Why wasn't that considered? Queuing, could that be handled with signal changes? What other things could we do that maybe isn't a full road diet of removing a lane, but instead making the lanes narrower where it is safe to do so? I live on one of Mountain View's famous narrow streets. Fire engines still get down there, trucks. We have a big giant pit that's a separate topic where somebody's dug out their entire plot of their house, but they got the land movers in, no problem. I noticed the level of service presented here was only for cars. I bike, I ride, I drive this segment almost every day. I walk on this area. I also bike, ride, and walk on California Avenue and love the road diet on there. Love it. The residents are starting to really love that as well. There's a lot of residents here. Highway 85 overpass, people are using both sides of that bridge. You can see the dirt where there's no grass growing because people walk there. It is also near the dollar store there in that segment, which is a very popular stop for a lot of families where they get out there. It is the local store. But I would also like to urge the CTC, thank you for serving here today, but also to consider a reduced speed limit more urgently and removing that part-time parking. Palo Alto has reduced their speed limit on Middlefield to 25 miles per hour. I drive that several times a week, and I put my bike on it. Used to be people went 45, 50 miles per hour. Now they go 30, 35. So, it's not 25, but it is slower and safer. Thank you.
So you mentioned that Middlefield would be at capacity or really congested if road diet were to be implemented. Would that, like, if there was congestion, would people that bike or would they go to other roads, or how would that work?
Here, and thank you for speaking.
Hello, my name is Committee, Council Transit Committee. My name is Greg Coladonato. My house is at the corner of Leslie Court and Middlefield. I've lived on the corridor for 16 years. One of my bedroom windows looks at Middlefield, and the other one has a glorious view of the Dollar Tree. Okay, as we saw in Mr. Nguyen's sixth slide, it's strange but true, but Middlefield is the only way you can get from one side of Mountain View to the other, east to west, on one road. None of the other roads go through. That in itself, to me, is a reason to upgrade this bike lane from class 2 to class 4, so that you can get through the city on a road. I am a cyclist myself, and I often use Middlefield. I'd like to address Mr. Committee Member McAllister's concerns. The traffic count on this road is not very high, but that's because biking in that bike lane sucks. So, like, you can't just use the count and say no one uses it, because it's dangerous to use this lane because there's always cars parked in it and always people popping out of driveways. So you're not going to know the actual natural traffic level in that bike lane until normal people feel safe biking in it. So, I mean, I get that and by the way, you should count more than every 8 years. So, like, if the last count was 2018, we should update that for sure. But I think that you'll see a lot more traffic in this lane when it's safe to be in. I think that you should probably go to full-time bike lanes when you can, staff resources permitting. I also think that a road diet would be good, although it doesn't seem consistent with the deadlines for this project. So maybe later do a road diet, because there are a lot of drag racers on Middlefield, and I know this because they comes right in my window when I'm sleeping. Okay, I'd also like to just point out that if the buses park in the bike lane, that makes this lane a lot less appealing. You have to go around a bus, which is not safe. Maybe put the bus stops on the right lane. Thank you.
Are there more in person? I'll go to the virtual speakers.
Bruce England.
Thank you. I just want to mention really quickly that the audio is pretty poor, particularly for Ellen, and also for Allison. Might be your distance from the microphone for the system, but kind of hard to hear everything you're saying. Okay, let's see what I can get into this amount of time. April Webster's letter is key to the things that we've been talking about out here, and so I won't repeat what she said. There's a lot in there to consider. But the ATP work, the Active Transportation Plan, should be play into this project as much as possible is one comment. We hear VMT and levels of service, but we're interested in seeing VMT emphasized for application to this project and any project like this, really. Multi-mode is the direction for active transportation, and all of our projects in the city should reflect that. The most important comment from me that you might not hear from anybody else tonight is about the abrupt curb at the north end of the path between Wisman Station going past Pyramid Park and Middlefield. The east-west projects will expand the amount of connectivity from those using the path today, including to access the park and the adjacent light rail stations. So Google was going to fix that. They had plans for it, so the city could, I believe, just leverage what Google's already put together in order to make that happen. Really quickly with the time I have left, lane width reductions and green complete streets are important. All of the BPAC input from their meeting, including community comment, very important, very detailed, and hope that you will take that into account as much as you can. What jumps out to me is that the definition of the project probably should have been fleshed out earlier because we're seeing the limitations and risks of compromising the funding, and we don't want that to happen. And then, no, I think I'm out of time. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there more virtual speakers?
Celia Paymer. Hi, I also second everything in April's letter from and that included green spaces. Sorry, Celia Paymer, resident of Mountain View, member of Green Spaces. I also just wanted to add on a few things I noticed during the meeting today. I was sort of surprised to hear that there was somehow a road diet would make it necessary to increase pavement space. Seems like if we're going to a road diet, one of the lanes could become a left-hand turn lane as necessary. And then I do want to hear more about the timeline and if it's possible to get an extension so that we can get better results because we don't do these very often and we're putting a lot of money into it. And so it should be what we want. I don't want to delay, obviously, but if it's something that we can maintain the majority of the timeline and get 100% better results, that would be great. Sorry, I lost my notes. I do want to say, I would like to see some more kind of quick build options so that we could get stuff in, and then maybe if the geometry is not quite right, it could be adjusted. I do see on El Camino that we've seen the traffic slow down and the buses do still fit. And so it would be nice to either narrow streets, or if we went to a road diet, then we wouldn't need to narrow the lane and everyone would still fit. So that seems like a good option. I do think it's ironic that we spent the first half of this meeting talking about how we would encourage private developers to encourage mode shift, and then now we're not following suit. So I do think we should kind of do what we preach and look for that mode shift and try to reduce vehicle miles traveled and increase our active transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there more speakers?
Mary Dadio.
Large section of Middle will have protected bike lanes and parking will be removed. We were just reminded that
Mary, your voice is spotty. Maybe you can start over again. Can you start over 2 minutes? Okay, start over again now and see if we can hear you. Okay.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me now?
Try again. Your voice is a little spotty, but maybe we'll bear with it. Mary, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, can you start?
Oh, I changed my microphone. Still not working.
Okay, maybe we can come back to you, Mary. Is there someone else? Give Mary some time.
April Webster.
April?
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So I was really wanting to talk about moving forward in a process and how do we, the implementation.
Be a little louder.
Can you hear me? I'm yelling. Can you hear me?
Okay, keep yelling.
Can you restart my time?
Sure.
Thank you. There's been issues with the sound recently. Okay, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to start saying I'm really disappointed about not being able to focus on what I wanted to tonight in my comments. And that's implementation and how we move from policy and plans into delivery. But I instead find myself needing to focus on a few claims I've heard tonight. First, staff continuing to evaluate a road diet could require a redesign, and jeopardize a project timeline. That raises a really important question. Why was either a road diet design advanced at the same time while the traffic analysis was underway? We only did the non-road diet design. Traffic analysis is really only useful if you do it earlier enough to actually shape the project. If it happens, if only one design direction is advanced, then the public input and even the analysis really doesn't have ability to affect the outcome, which then, talking about that whole process and also on grant timing, I wanted to jump onto that, sorry. I don't think we should assume the OBAG 3 deadline prevents design changes until we confirm with MTC, VTA, and Caltrans. I work with MTC on one of their committees, and I spoke with them back in March 2025. They told me the OBAG 3 deadline should not prevent the city from reevaluating or modifying the project design to address public input. We should check and see if that flexibility still applies. It's a year later, but we knew about a year ago, and staff was added to that thread in June. Then in terms of NACTO, I'm reading from the Urban Bikeway Design Guide on the Designing Protected Bike Lanes chapter. It says, motor vehicle lanes should be narrowed to support the widest feasible bike lanes. At posted speeds of 35 miles per hour or less, general purposes travel lanes can be 10-foot wide and still support transit and truck uses. Where transit or heavy trucks are rare, a travel lane of 9 feet is acceptable width for a general purpose travel lane.
Okay, so now the time is up.
Thank you.
Okay. Who's next?
Cliff Chambers.
Hey, Cliff?
Hi, Cliff Chambers, resident of Mountain View. I just want to reiterate a few things that have been said in both April's letter, and James Cozumel wrote a very thoughtful and great letter, and I hope you've all read it. First off, with the OBAG deadline, professionally, I did a lot of work and contracts with MTC, and they regularly extended contracts, changed it. If there's community input, they make changes. So please look into that. And if staff hasn't asked them, I hope that staff asks staff to check with MTC to make sure that it is indeed a constraint. I think the whole corridor needs to be thought of, because it is a whole corridor in the draft ATP plan, class 4 along all of Middlefield Road. One of the things that does the whole discussion of the road diet focuses on all the constraints, and it doesn't talk about the benefits, the safety benefits, the reductions of speed. That is why we did the California Street, because of a fatal accident. There are a lot of benefits of road diets that are not covered in the staff report. I am all for, along the entire corridor, having full-time bike lanes in the interim before it even goes to class 4. It's extremely dangerous. If you go out on Crittenton Middle School, students learn how to ride the bikes in those lanes, and then on the weekends, they have to cut into the main traffic lanes. It's dangerous. Somebody's going to get killed. Somebody mentioned earlier that Middlefield is a drag street. It's true. I live right on Middlefield. People oftentimes go 50, 55 miles an hour between Renksdorf and Old Middlefield. We need to reduce the speeds. We need to reduce the speed limit. If we can't have a road diet, we need to think about speed limits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jesse?
Jesse? You're up.
Hey, thank you.
Jesse?
Oh, hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I bike on this road, and I just want to agree with everyone else who's been saying it's a dangerous road to bike on, particularly when people are parking in the bike lane all the time when they're not supposed to be. So that's an easy fix to make that bike lane permanent. I support narrowing the lanes, reducing the speed limit, having a permanent protected bike lane, all that good stuff. And it's just a little disappointing to hear that the vehicle miles traveled is apparently given so much weight, and it's kind of like the end all be all. And yeah, it'll be more congested if we do a road diet. But do we know how many people are going to switch to biking? How many more people will walk on the street? And how much safer it's going to be? I really think human life should come first over, some congestion. And people will reroute to other roads as well. So I know we've had some really great protected bike lanes put in on El Camino Real and on California Street. And I'm wondering, has the city done a full before and after to see, how much bicycle and pedestrian activity goes up after those changes? Because I've seen it. I know it's a significant increase, but I don't know if it's, are people riding their bikes 100% more, 200% more? Do we have the count? And could that be used as kind of an estimate to say like, oh yeah, we're going to, through the road diet or through, whatever measures we take, fewer people will end up driving here, but we can expect approximately, this much of an increase in people walking and biking and using active transportation. So I really think that should be kind of the standard, is to consider the benefits, not just the downsides to road diets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Dadio?
Mary, you're up again.
Hope this works better. Oh, sounds better. Okay. So I am happy to see about the more protected bike lanes and that parking is going to be removed. But we're just reminded that Middlefield is a high injury network. And I think we all realize that a lot of people drive much faster and that this endangers all members of the public, including the drivers, cyclists, and walkers. So if we sent officers out all the time to enforce it, that would be expensive. There's a much lower cost method that we've been hearing that reliably reduces speeding, and that's to narrow the lane width. So that would be a permanent corrective action that could be implemented without too much cost via paint. Caltrans has demonstrated on ECR that 10.5-foot wide lanes are workable. I would suggest that the primary questions to ask about the 10.5-foot wide lanes on El Camino the question's not whether box trucks feel crowded next to buses, but instead whether speeding's been reduced and whether the total number of accidents and the severity of accidents have been reduced on El Camino. So I think one lane on each side of the road in the new design should be reduced at least to 10.5 or 10 feet to encourage vehicles to drive at the speed limit and to create more space for bike lanes. I think more bike lane space is going to grow in importance as more bikes, and especially e-bikes, start using these lanes, because bikes are going to need to be able to pass each other. They're going to need space for passing. Also, I think a road diet should be considered at least for the overpass. Alma Street in Palo Alto reduces down to one lane, and traffic moves along just fine there. So I think a road diet as you're approaching and leaving the overpass is perfectly reasonable to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Karen, more speakers.
One more virtual.
One more virtual, and then we'll take one away.
Tracy?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, of course, now my dogs are going to bark because they heard you. I just wanted to say that I support the letter by April and the comments by the public. I do live on Farley Street, which is right off of Middlefield. I could be going up and down Middlefield on my bike, but I do not feel safe enough to do it. So I definitely support a road diet. My grandson works over in Charleston Plaza, his little after-school job, and I basically have to drive him there. One time I was busy and I was like, uh, can't you ride your bike? It's not very far. And he's like, he rode it and he's like, I'm never doing that again. So, and I can't ask him. Then I paid more attention to it even. I really can't ask him to do that. So we're doing extra trips up and down Middlefield. I would love it if it extended further. I know it's not part of this project, but I just want to say that I do support having safer bike lanes. When I lived in Palo Alto, that was one of the things I did love, that Bryant Street was really a place where I could go up and down the city without really a lot of worries about cars. But here in Mountain View, I don't have as many. I really appreciate that you're thinking and planning towards it. And thank you.
Thank you. There are no more virtual speakers, is that true? Yes, no more. I think this is our last in-person speaker.
April Lehman, I'm a city resident. And I think one thing is if we could reconsider the question around the road diet, a way to think about it might be what are the alternatives that car commuters have and what are the alternatives that bike and pedestrian commuters have. Right now, car commuters have Central Expressway and they also have 101, not far from a car perspective. Bicyclists, as you know, mentioned by this other cyclist, don't have another alternative for going this direction in kind of a safe way. So if we're gonna like look at this question around, because I think there was a question of saying like if we do a road diet for commuting through volume, but that might just move that volume over to Central Expressway or to 101, which are both reasonable, I think, commuting options for people trying to go any kind of a distance. Bikes don't have any kind of option. And on the pedestrian piece, I would love you guys to think about that overpass. I know there was a question around timing, but you know, if folks look at the situation right now, Stevens Creek is a very common walking and biking path, and it empties out where there is no pedestrian overpass option over 85. And there's even no good way to cross the field anywhere near there. And so we are seeing people walking on a very unsafe portion of Middlefield there. So I think like that's something to just bring back, is make sure that the pedestrian option there for being able to cross over 85 is a solid option, given how well it connects up with other fantastic pedestrian options.
Thank you. Okay, so last check. I think we're done with speakers. Do you see any more? So questions that have come up and comments for committee members.
I'm sorry. Okay, so one of the things that came up was this green street, complete green street checklist, and if that would be possible for future projects. Did staff have an answer to that question?
I don't know if I saw that question before, but
Oh, okay.
yes.
It-
So
it came in as part of the letter, and I think that is a question.
so for projects that are funded regionally, such as Measure B, for OMAG projects, that complete streets checklist is a requirement of VTA. So that was actually filled out in 2022 when we applied for the grant, and that went through the VPAC process that was approved by VPAC at that time. So all projects going forward would do that same effort at the time they are kind of initiated.
Whether they're regional or not.
Actually, all projects with regional funding will go through that. Typically, our larger projects, larger corridors are the ones that go for regional funding. So it's California, Miramonte, or this one. Smaller projects like a resurfacing would not be subject to this because we don't usually go. Those are more street maintenance for narrow residential streets. So we are in compliance with the complete streets policy. And going forward, if there are updates, one part of the question is that the complete streets checklist today looks different than it did in 2022 because it's frequently updated.
Yeah.
Durango, just to follow up, Principal Gonzalez very well comprehensively addressed that. I think sort of reading between the lines a little bit is, do we apply this to all projects?
Yes, I think that was.
I think that's where you're going to get into. So to answer your question on that, it depends on the type of project. When we're identifying a complete street project, it does make sense to apply it. So I know that we have the next one that we're looking at, I believe, is Rankstorf, so that we would apply it there. But it isn't applied to every single project, as it depends on the scope that we're doing. Sometimes we're not doing an entire corridor, we're just doing a portion. We may be just doing general maintenance. But if we have identified a corridor that it absolutely makes sense to, then I agree.
Okay, so right now, the ones I'm remembering are California, Middlefield, Rankstorf. Start is in progress. Yeah, but those three are the ones that I'm recalling off the top of my head that are considered like complete Green Street projects.
Moffett.
Oh, Moffett. Yes, how could I forget? Okay. Always. Okay. There was some public comment about quick build, and I was just wondering if staff could kind of address that. Is that I think that there was an idea that we could link it to the active transportation plan that's in progress, but how we might be able to add a program now. I don't know. I'm trying to understand. But that sounds like part of the question from residents.
I'll try to tackle the first part here.
Okay. Or how best can we understand the implications of what a quick build program is on the city, or
Yeah,
I think some context to that, right?
I'm getting this from your question. How can a quick build be implemented? What's that type of framework like? I think I'll start the first half, and then maybe if Director Henning has anything to add. As we are stepping back and looking at the whole department, we are splitting off the transportation planning and traffic engineering section. That may be a good opportunity to really get the cohesion between the planning, transportation planning and traffic engineering. They already are communicate well together, but under one division, I think that would really help. And I think at that time, we can evaluate what a program looks like for quick builds. How can we implement that? How can we engage our street maintenance folks or other vendors to identify kind of level of quick builds?
Can I piggyback off that and ask a question? So when you're talking about how to implement quick builds, is BPAC asked, can you advance the parking removal and put in 24-hour bike lanes ahead of the rest of the project? In essence, isn't that a quick build sort of a request, or is a quick build something other?
I interpret a quick build really to be something that you're implementing in the field. That is really a new improvement, something that changes. I guess in theory, we are changing your parking restriction, but I'm envisioning, an intersection improvement, a corridor section improvement, and adding something that is more related to quick builds.
Okay, if you did that, eliminated the parking and in a 24-hour bike lane with plastic bollards, then is that a quick build?
That could be considered, yes.
Trying to,
yeah. And again, once we reorganize the public works department and have this engineering division, I think that's an element that they really put into and figure out how can we program look like, what kind of resources are needed to do.
Okay, sorry for interrupting.
Yes, okay, so I'm now remembering, and this is kind of in context to a project that council saw recently. So this, not only do we have pedestrians and cyclists as users, this is the PTA bus route that's used. And so and I recall the conversation about the dugout, particularly in front of the one upcoming project. So as we are doing improvements along Middlefield and apologies if I missed it in any of the attachments, I don't recall. How will we be addressing the safety of the new class 4 bike lanes with this existing BTA bus route? Hopefully that makes
It did make sense. So I think you're referring to the 490 East Middlefield project at the.
That's a corner of Ellis, yes, like that's just one example, but the bus stops along that corridor.
Sure. So I think for just the bus stops along the corridor, I'm going to let Engineer Gonzalez kind of initiate that response, and then I can speak to the 490.
Sure. So the project is 35%. We're moving into the 65%. We're just initiating our conversations with Caltrans. So there is time to look at those treatments and see if there's ways to improve those. But at this point, we would be creating what we call a conflict zone. So all of the green striping that you typically see in intersections or on driveways, that would be the same type of treatment you would see at a bus stop. So bus drivers, vehicle drivers, and cyclists are all kind of cued that this is a conflict zone. So the other recommendation that was evaluated was, could you have in-lane stops for buses? In some cases, those are practical and feasible. In a lot of other cases, you need additional right-of-way. You have to kind of find a way to scoop the bikes and the pedestrians behind the bus for those to work. So it's a lot more work to make those work. So we can evaluate on a case-by-case basis to look to see if there's opportunities there. But right now, we have the conflict striping in the lane and in the bus stop area. So we can essentially there's a week.
Is when this comes, sorry, before I forget again, when this comes back to council, might staff be able to work with VTA to let us know just how many stops there are along that Middlefield corridor going both directions? I just think that would be like helpful context for us to understand just.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, and then to your question regarding specifically to the development at 490 East Middlefield. So we expect that the Middlefield Complete Streets project is going to be constructed before the development. So then as part of the development process, we do a pretty detailed review of development projects. As part of that is the off-site, sort of the sidewalk, curb, bike lane, travel lanes, any modifications. They will be, we're coordinating with the developer, but there's going to be a dugout associated with that. And similar to what Principal Engineer Gonzalez mentioned about how we'll evaluate those weaves and the proper application of bike lane treatments and such, we would do that. That would be an effort to make sure that it's safe, provides enough for visibility, and that the treatments we're applying there make the most sense. So we do that with the development application process. They would submit the detailed plans, we'd review it, we'd make sure it, the Middlefield Street project was made. And then they're coming in and basically revising me through that process.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm less concerned with that project and more about if that would exist along the corridor. If we would see, maybe other redevelopments do that same thing, and if that's kind of where it is. Thank you. I understand that. And then one of the things that I had brought up when we were looking at that project is that there aren't a lot of cues on what the speed limit is. And so I'm curious if in addition to removal of the parking prior to the Complete Street project going forward, if we could just add some more signage on what the speed limit is. Because I've lived at Moffett in Middlefield, and now I live near Middlefield and Wisman. And I do think a lot of the speeding is there are no signs. I can walk from Ellis to Wisman, and I don't even think there's a sign, at least on that right side. I don't even know if there's I don't. Yeah. So that whole block, which is very large, right, has no signage, and I think that's why people go 50 plus on that. Is that something that staff could look at doing as a part if we go forward with the, I think, recommendation? I would just ask colleagues, so it sounds like Okay, great. Sorry to get into comment.
Would you like a straw poll already?
I don't know if there's any other questions, but those are the ones that I'm now remembering. Thank you, Chair, for letting me ask those.
Good comments. You're on a roll.
Okay, what else? The prompts. It's gonna go to council. That is, yeah, I think,
We needed a motion. We're just looking for. feedback.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
information and.
I think, yeah, well, thanks staff very much. Thanks to the residents in the community for the input. I think, one of the things that comes to mind is that we can move forward with this version of the Complete Streets project, and it won't preclude us from looking in the future at a potential road diet. I think that I'd love to see if the improvements that we make will help address the concerns that residents have about the user experience on Middlefield before moving to a road diet. I think when the city tends to look at what is the process called for the speed reduction? There's different levels with which there's different options with which we can choose, and I think there's different levers with which we trigger depending on what the issue is in the neighborhood. And so I would see this as this Complete Street project as being kind of step one as an improvement. I think moving from class 2 to class 4, I think being able to remove that parking immediately, putting more signage, all of those will be heavy improvements to what exists now. I'm encouraged that staff is already in my notes, but at least for the Caltrans segment, it sounds like there's a path forward not too long after the design moves forward of this project for the project. While I'm concerned about the CPUC DA section, I think the most immediate is just the Middlefield corridor in general, and then the overpass over 85. Because I do see people scurrying across, and it always makes my stomach churn. But there is an entrance on the side where an exit entrance on the side where the sidewalk is for the trail. So I'm not sure which side, if people are on the other side, how they're getting up there, because there's no path on that side. But I think we're headed in the right direction. And I do feel like just because we don't have a recent number for Member McAllister, as somebody who walks and runs in the area, I am seeing more people out, and I do see more development coming in, and we have a new user who is in the space on Ellis, and so I'm already seeing a lot of walking and talking meetings happening. So I think the sooner we can make improvements, the better.
Okay, Member McAllister.
Okay, how about a little more, okay, I'm not as suggested as you guys have said. This is fresh eyes. So I'm gonna probably be a little more pragmatic and more objective to this project, or the concept behind the project. I support not a road diet. I've had conversations with others that we are still car centric, and this is a regional corridor. And yes, we have El Camino, we have Central, but those get bogged down because there's a lot of commerce along there. We still need to have ways to get through. Highway 101 is always backed up, but that's beside. We have north corridors that we need to be very conscious about. Grant Road, El Monte, San Antonio. We have east and west, like Cuesta. We have El Camino. We have Middlefield. And so we still need to be conscious that cars are not going away. They're still here. And when I bring up the numbers, I always like to say, what is the data to support these projects? I see a lot of passion in people and their desire to put this in. And every time I see public comment, people say, oh, there's a lot of support for it. Well, of course, you're going to see a lot of support because these people are wanting these particular changes. But we still have a silent majority out there that I sort of represent, that this is a place I need to get from point A to point B, and I want to get there efficiently and safely. I don't see a large percentage of the city bicyclists. I understand that there may be 3% are people on bikes. And so for us to spend money, which is limited for us for the city, we have a lot of projects that I want to see a demand. I want to see a critical mass of people using it and spend millions of dollars on a project that only benefits so many few that does I need to be able to feel better about supporting it. They're talking about road diets. There was just recently making the lane smaller. Just recently, we had a report from the fire department. The fire department said the response time is slowing down because of congestion. And all of a sudden, you're taking a major artery and you're going to make the lane smaller. And I think that's going to affect, and that was brought up by staff, the emergency response for people to get there. And we do not want to choke any access that the public safety needs to get to certain areas. I said I watched the EPC, VPAC and the comments, and they're passionate, but I want to see data. We saw data from 2018. How many people are really using it? We saw traffic accidents from 2019, and it's a high thing. So in some regards, I see people looking at this subjectively, not objectively. And this is a broader, for what I see throughout any project that comes along. And so from 2019, we had 2014 to 2019, there's 26 accidents. Well, people say it's getting worse. Well, how can you say that unless we have the data to support projects like that? And that's my feeling how we go forward on it. The green space, the ATP, all that stuff I support because that will enhance people, but that doesn't mean that just because you build it, they will come. And Valerie, don't hate me for this one. I have a business right on El Camino. I there all the time, and I do not see people using El Camino to what some people say expected. So when I hear people say there's a lot of demand for it, let's hear the data. How do you come up with that data? They say that people will get to El Camino. I would not ride on El Camino. It's not a road. So I'm always conscious of the amount when I hear input. I asked the example of 1,700 people. Postcards were sent out, and we got 28 back. To me, that says there's not a big demand, or there's not that much interest. So you always have to put in the back of your mind, yes, the people that are here that speak, they want to be heard, they need to be safe, and I support. I appreciate their passion, but I don't see that they are the all end of people saying this. We got to do something. So that was more of a broader context of what I was saying, and I appreciate staff looking at something and realizing maybe I could be one. But yes, this is a regional corridor. It's put in there. We still have to be considerate about people moving down. Because if we don't have these regional corridors, where to the young gentleman, persons came in, where are they going to go? They're going to go on side streets. There's no doubt about it. They're going to hit any way they can get there, and Waze is going to figure it out. And so we still need those major corridors to get people from Palo Alto to Sunnyvale, Los Altos Hills to 101. And they need to be able to keep moving. We need to be able to have that service so that it helps our residents in all regions. So I support the recommendation, but those are things that I think we need to be aware of and be concerned about.
Okay, thank you very much. So my comments are, I agree with both my committee members. People will continue to use cars, hopefully electric ones, which, yes, it's getting expensive in the community. But also I think this is an area where people are going to use bikes more, and I particularly agreed with the speaker who talked about electric bikes, e-bikes, and kind of the changing nature. I think that this is a area where those particularly might be used. I think it's a little different than El Camino, because El Camino this is kind of a lovely corridor in terms of it's not all the way there, but it has a lot of trees. It has the median. I mean, I know El Camino has a median too, but this has fewer lanes than El Camino, and I feel like once our whatever that was, when precise plan I was recused from is formally named Northwest East was my precise plan. When that gets further built out, I feel like there's a large portion of this that's residential. I feel like the use will change, and I like that you're slowly moving, a half foot here, a foot there into buffer lane, or whatever you call it, buffer lane, but a buffer between the bikers and pedestrians and the cars. So to me, the critical things for right now are, like Deepak said, moving up the parking removal, and possibly even putting in bollards. I'm not a huge fan of bollards, but I really liked hearing from neighbors and what they envision. I'm thinking this is a paving project, but we have our active transportation project, and I'm hoping we'll quickly make that a safer bike route, with the constraints of staff, as soon as we can, and migrate as much of the land as we can. I mean, I would say maybe you could consider 1 10-foot car lane, migrate as much as we can into the buffer. And maybe at some point in the future, because at some point in the future, maybe that buffer can become a green buffer, which I've seen in other places in Wilson photographs. The place I drive to my mom's, Walnut Creek, is actually pretty similar to this, and it has a somewhat narrow green buffer for the bike lanes. Okay, so I also let's see if I would like to hear in the future from neighbors what they feel about the plastic bollards. Many people feel they're not that safe and not that nice in front of residential places. We get them in temporarily. What do people want? How do people feel about them? And, what kind of priority and where should, a curb or green strip be? But that I think is more for the future. I think that also I've heard a lot, and I agree with Member Kamei about doing anything we can to reduce the speeds, whether it be, and what is the speed supposed to be there? I just looked it up. I just drove there. I didn't see any.
35, right?
It's supposed to be 35. Yeah. So when I went to planning school, we would talk about how streets read, which just means like when you're driving down the street, does it kind of say to you, do you kind of get the impression this is kind of like a freeway and I should be going 40 or 50? And honestly, that is the feeling I get when I'm there. So I want to give people the feeling that they should be going slower. So eventually, probably even if they're small green barriers is what I would want. But I think that's more a thing for the ATV. Then in addition, so I'm agreeing with previous members, and BPAC, which is advance the parking removal, given staff constraints, do anything we can to slow down speeds. And this is maybe more for the ATP, but look at possible green infrastructure and You know, maybe over time we will be able to have a road diet because everybody will be on e-bikes and on the mass transit. In the area. And then my last thing is that we did get a group letter from really a lot of people, put a lot of work into it. And it has 4 or 5 requests, many of them about process, and we've kind of been bringing it up during this meeting. But some of it is about timing, and also, as Member Kamei said, a complete green streets screening checklist. And as Mr. Gonzalez said, that's, you know, maybe changing over time. So maybe, so they're making some requests around that. And, you know, we just had the biodiversity plan. So sort of highlighting that. And I think we talked about the rest of the items there. So those are all of my comments, and thank you for all of your work.
Thank you.
Did that trigger any final comments for anyone?
I think, when does it come to council?
So we'll take this to council when we have final PSNA plans and specifications. So we won't see this until the fall or later. The last slide we showed.
Yeah, you'll be coming as a
Sorry.
comment.
We'll invite you back as a special guest. We still need to go through the Caltrans process, so they need to provide the design input where there's crossings with 85 and 37, and then also the OBAG 3 grant process has its own set of checklists that we need to step through. So that takes 6 months right there.
Well, I think what could be helpful is just being able to share with the community if their staff thoughts on a green and complete streets screening checklist for future projects, and then the quick build program. I think that will continue to come up, and so I would just ask if staff could maybe have some thought on it.
Put that on the agenda, some report.
No, like I think as these projects come forward, we're gonna probably, that might be a continued suggestion.
Yes.
Or maybe as part of the ATP, I don't know. I think it's just worth maybe pulling that thread a little bit and just where that might fit into all the other things we're working on. Where would we leave it into ATP? Right now we have to keep it regional, or it's a size or scope. I don't know. I just
no, I like
you said that, you know, there's you know, a few ideas and requests in the letter, and so just having some sort of response would probably be appreciated. Because I think we're especially I think I listed 4 or 5 complete street projects that the city's looking at. So as those conversations continue on too, and we evaluate those, it just might be helpful as part of the conversation. That's just
no, I like that you brought that up again. I think the community put a lot of work into that letter, and we brought it up in various ways tonight, but I think it will continue to come up. So if you can take it as a you know, a guideline, set of guidelines for future projects, because whether you do or not, I think it's going to continue to come up. So, and Member McAllister, you look sad. What?
No, I just know I have a lot of work. I gotta get familiar with Lake Streets. I gotta get familiar with GTP. You kept going green, and I'm thinking green stripes. You're talking.
I know.
Vegetation
It is
green,
yeah.
so I gotta change that one. But I thought this El Camino 10 years ago was considered going to be a great moment. You look at El Camino now, it's a little hard to envision what they thought 10 years ago when it went well. And the other thing is the objective is we used to have 5 bike shops in Mountain. I don't think we have any now.
Right.
So just something to think
We
about
have
when
the
you
repair cafe that comes.
But-
And the, yeah,
My thing.
yeah, I know. That's why I said
Thank you.
it. But they come and they go around, or our bike rodeos brings the mobile bike.
But that's still, you know, maybe that's when you consider the popularity, it's not this.
No,
Now-
I agree with you, and that's part of our previous, maybe somebody should put a bike shop in the ground
Well,
floor.
then we were looking at the e-bikes at our last meeting. And if e-bikes start using your protected bike lanes, there's where you may have potential. So
Let's hear that. Thank you.
learning. Don't have something. Thank you.
Okay, so I think those are the final comments, and we will close this item and move on now to item number 6, which is committee staff announcements, updates, requests, and committee report. So first, we have 6.1 is staff comments. And Jennifer Ng from Public Works Director will provide us.
Actually, no staff comment.
No.
You can move on.
Okay. So now we move to staff to 6.2, which is committee comments. Do any committee members have comments or reports to share with the committee? No, I thought you brought photographs.
I just wanted to show you guys, since we don't need to take the time to staff. I just want you, if there's some, you look at them and you see something that resonates with you, then we'll bring it back when there's some ideas. I just don't want to skip over it.
Okay, I have some action to already. So I have some eyes on this underway.
I like you sharing photos, and I will be sharing mine at the next meeting.
Well, I think pictures were the things.
And they will be pictures of the place I drive by that I think Middlefield Road.
The photos are just examples. It's not just what you think, your initial thought, and this. Just maybe we can look at it and come to some sort of consensus.
So now we're at the part of the agenda where members of the public joining us virtually or in person can provide comments on the staff and council comments that we didn't have.
As a member of the public, I'm very curious about the photographs.
Yeah, here, I will share.
Feels
my
like it
photographs
kind of got talked about.
with,
as a
I will
staff.
share my photographs with the remaining members of the public who are here, if the remaining. They were discussed, even though they all said they weren't discussed. All discussed, not discussing. Yes, so that.
Well, it's a commit, we're still doing committee reports, or is it?
Yes, do you have committee reports also?
Nope. I just, yes.
Well, yeah, this is the part where the public gets to weigh in and so the public did.
Public is weighing in that you did discuss pictures that you didn't want to share, but you want people to look
Unfortunately,
at.
I only share in person.
I said 0.
Okay. Member McAllister mentioned these photographs. So I think they are part of public records.
Yes.
Right. And I guess my question or comment was, what's interesting about these pictures?
Just the design, how things are evolving. That's all.
Okay. So these are pictures of recent published projects. So are there any virtual speakers? Okay. So we will now move to item number 7, which is adjournment. Thank you so much for joining us. Our next Council Transportation Committee meeting will be on June 16th, 2026. And the meeting is adjourned at 8:47 p.m. Thank you.
Really deep.